Hi guys, today I'm here to talk to you about all the books that I read during August. In August I hosted the Classicsathon, which was my first time hosting a readathon on YouTube, and I had so much fun with it, so thank you to all of you who participated. I had a really good reading month and got through lots of the books on my TBR, which I was really pleased with, and it was so nice seeing you reading lots of classics too, and I enjoyed it so much that I will be doing another one at the end of the year, so I'll be revealing more details about that nearer to the time. This time I will give you more notice because I realised there wasn't a lot of notice given for this one due to all the various technical difficulties I did have. So I'm starting planning the next one now, and it's going to be around Christmas time, just to give you a heads up. So I will be talking about that more closer to the time. But if there are any things that you'd like to do differently or like to see in the next Classicsathon, then do let me know in the comments, because I just enjoyed it so much and I hope that you all did too. So I read 5 books during August and I really enjoyed lots of them. Others I didn't enjoy as much, mainly because my expectations of them were so high, and so I was left a bit disappointed. And my reading month was quite funny because I spent a long time reading one book and then reading half of another, and then during the last weekend of August I read 4 books. So the majority of these I did read right at the end of the month, and that didn't affect my reading experience in any way. Actually, I really enjoyed doing that, but it was quite funny. So the first book that I read in August was actually the one that I enjoyed the most, and it was Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys. And this is a really funny book to talk about because it is a retelling of Jane Eyre, and Jean Rhys takes one of the characters, Bertha Mason, from Jane Eyre and reimagines what her life was like before the beginning of Jane Eyre, and I absolutely loved that. But it is strange to talk about because I feel like it's hard to talk about if you don't want to be spoiled for Jane Eyre, but you can also read this without having read Jane Eyre and understand it. It's just the talking about it. I don't want to give Jane Eyre spoilers, but at the same time, there's not a lot that can be spoiled about this book. It's not the kind of book that's very plot heavy, whereas I think that Jane Eyre is. So it is strange to talk about, but I'm going to give my opinions on it rather than going into the details of the plot. And I am also going to do another video in the future about this in comparison to Jane Eyre, where I can talk about them more freely, because I know that some of you haven't read Jane Eyre and don't want to be spoiled about Jane Eyre. It's just a really difficult one to talk about, but I did love it. It's what I wanted to read for so long, and I'm so pleased that I finally did. And I loved the character of Antoinette. She was brilliant, and I loved seeing her at the various points in her life, and I loved seeing a certain character from Jane Eyre, a certain male character, pop up, and Jean Rhys's interpretation of him. If you know the character in question, then you'll know how popular he is outside of Jane Eyre in popular culture, and he's just so well known. And so we get this idea in our heads of this romantic hero, but Jean Rhys really does flip the head on that and makes a character who is deeply flawed, and she's not scared to acknowledge that. And I loved the setting and the way that Jean Rhys writes about it. I've never read a book set in the 1830s in Jamaica before, so it was really nice to read something different. But at the same time, this definitely feels like a modern novel rather than a Victorian novel, and you can tell that Jane Eyre is the original Victorian novel and this is a modern retelling of it, and I liked how it was less restricted by that. So I don't want to talk too much about this one, even though I did enjoy it a lot, because I feel like I can do a whole separate video on it, and I'm going to be talking about it a lot more in other videos, and I don't want to spoil it, and the more I think about it, the more it would be easy to spoil things. So this is kind of a vague review of Wide Sargasso Sea, but I did love it and would highly recommend it. I think you can read it if you haven't read Jane Eyre, but I do think that if you have read Jane Eyre, then it really enriches both reading experiences. Then the second book that I read during August was Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy, which is another book that I've wanted to read for ages. It's one of his more popular novels, and I've been saving it for that reason, because in the past few months I've been reading some of his lesser known works, and I can't say that I enjoyed this as much as some of his others. I know that it is a really good book and really interesting and really made me think, but in terms of my enjoyment levels, I thought there were some things about it that I didn't quite like and other things that I thought were absolutely amazing, and so it was a really strange time reading it because I had very conflicting thoughts on it. This tells the story of Jude, who is an orphan and who grows up with his aunt, and as he gets older he marries a woman called Arabella, and they marry because she tells him that she is pregnant after they've been doing, you know, naughty things, and Jude is very innocent and he marries her, but it turns out she's not pregnant, and it's all about married life and his relationship with his cousin Sue, who also gets married, and it is really to do with marriage in Victorian Britain and the constraints of marriage and what happens when you can't gain a divorce, or what happens when you don't want to marry but you're living with someone. And I really loved that side of it. I loved the political side of the story and how it really does push against the norms of Victorian society, and that is what I love most about this style of Thomas Hardy book. But I felt like in terms of the personal relationships in this book, I didn't quite get that tug on my heartstrings that I have with books like Tessa the D'Urbervilles, which I do think this is very similar to. I feel like in terms of the way that Tessa D'Urbervilles is told as a story, it's a much neater and tighter plot, and I didn't feel like this at all with Jude the Obscure. I feel like with Tess you get very defining moments in her life, which you could have got with Jude the Obscure, and he could have taken it in that direction, but he just didn't. And so I felt like there were parts of the story that were too long and others I would have liked to have explored more. But there was a certain moment towards the end of this book that really did kind of change my thoughts on it, because it was so horrifically well done. It's a really terrible moment during the book, and I did not see it coming whatsoever. And even though I tell you that something happens, I don't think you'll be able to see it if you haven't read it and then decide to read it either. It was very shocking, and I had to put the book down, and I didn't know what I was doing because I was thinking, oh my gosh, how has that happened? And it was just so brilliantly done, and I feel like I wanted more of those moments, more of those shocking Hardy moments that make me go, oh my gosh, what just happened here? And I didn't quite get that, other than maybe once or twice during the book. Whereas Tessa D'Urbervilles, there's one every single chapter almost, and even Far From the Madding Crowd or The Woodlanders in particular, there were just those moments where Hardy shines, and that's what he does best, and I didn't feel like there were as many in Jude the Obscure. So I liked it, but it's actually one of my least favourite Hardy books that I've read, which I wasn't expecting. I don't think I enjoyed it any more than I've enjoyed any of his other books that I've read, so that was quite a shame. But at the end of the day, it was a really interesting book to read. It really got me thinking, and really got me thinking about morals, and that's what I love reading about, to do with Victorian society and Victorian literature, how they make you think about your own morals and your own beliefs. And I liked it, and I would really recommend it. I'd be interested to know what you all think if you've read it. I feel like it's quite a divisive book, and that's okay. I might reread it in the future. I didn't hate it. I just wanted to love it slightly more than I did. Another book that had me conflicted, and another one that I wanted to read for ages and was a bit confused by my reaction to, was A Room with a View by E.M. Forster. This is a book that I've featured on countless TBRs and have only just got round to reading, and I wanted to really love this book, and I've heard so many great things about E.M. Forster's writing, and I really love the idea of this, about a girl who is on holiday in Italy and then comes back and has a romance and is to do with class, and I feel like it was good. But again, with Hardy, there just weren't many defining moments in the book, and it all kind of blended into one, and I felt like a lot of the scenes were rushed and I wanted him to take a bit more time, and so I felt very confused at points about exactly what was happening. But I did really like the main character, Lucy, an excellent name choice, and I thought that she was very interestingly written, because she has lots of flaws in her personality that actually make her quite a likeable character, because it means that she is human. There were times that she made some decisions that I don't think I would have made personally, or times when she did things where I thought, why are you doing that? But the book came together then, and you could really see why she'd made the decisions and how they linked into the overall plot. I wanted something else from it. I wanted to love it, and I kind of enjoyed it, but I was also looking forward to finishing it in a way that I thought, I just want to get this done now. I did, however, really like this look at Edwardian society and how the Edwardian society has changed from Victorian society, how we feel like we're entering a new age and things are changing and feelings are changing and our relationships with each other were changing, and I liked the look at characters, and I loved how each character felt very individual and representative of people in overall society. I liked it, and I will be reading more E.M. Forster, but I just wanted a spark, and the spark wasn't there, and that was quite sad. But the ending was great. I really liked how it ended. I liked the direction he took the story in, but I just wanted something extra from it. After A Room with a View, I read a play, and it was Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. I've wanted to read another Shakespeare play for absolutely ages, but I haven't been able to because I was studying it, and I didn't want to confuse the plays in my mind because I was studying Othello and I didn't want to read another tragedy, or I didn't really want to read anything else by him, so I've been hanging on. And I think now I'm going to try and read a Shakespeare play every few months, mainly because I'm really enjoying it, and I think the more that you read Shakespeare, the more you understand his writing. It can be very tricky at first to get used to the style and the metre, but I think once you've got into it, then it just comes very naturally and you start to understand it more. Romeo and Juliet is of course a very famous love story, and I wanted to read it because I'm very interested in analysing what makes a good love story and whether you need to have true love to be a good love story. And I think that Romeo and Juliet is a book that you can reference in regards to other works of literature. It's very influential, not just on books that were written, but also other forms of media too. And I feel like it's a play that you need to read because there are so many misconceptions about it that you have to read it for yourself to find out what is the actual truth of the text. Obviously, reading a play is nothing like watching it, so I have ordered the Baz Luhrmann adaptation of it. So I'm going to watch that and see how I like that, because I did watch that. I studied Romeo and Juliet, but we never read it. We just watched the Baz Luhrmann adaptation, and we didn't even watch the whole thing. It was just clips from the film, so I didn't like it then, and I really didn't like Romeo and Juliet when I studied it, but now I find that I've got a greater appreciation for the book, and I actually think that's because I'm slightly older than I was when I was studying it. I was about 14 then, and now I'm 18, and I feel like as I've grown older with it, and I'm now older than the characters, I can look back on it and think, okay, this play is pretty strange and lots goes on in it that I probably didn't fully understand when I was younger. I mean, I wasn't much younger, it was 4 years ago, but I feel like as I have got older and I've read more too, then your perception changes of it, and I really liked reading it for that reason. I will definitely be reading more Shakespeare now, and it's really nice to get back into it. I feel like if you haven't read Romeo and Juliet, then it's a play that you definitely should read, or at least go and watch, just because it is an absolute classic, and I feel like that is why I read it. And I did really, probably enjoy isn't the word, because there were some very sad moments in the play, but I feel like it was one that I really needed to read, and I'm very glad that I did. Right at the start of the year, in my Classics I Want to Read in 2018 video, I featured the selected shorter poems of Thomas Hardy, and this is the edition chosen and introduced by John Wayne in the Macmillan series, which is quite an old one, so I don't know if you can get this one now. So that's the edition, just because the poems vary from edition to edition, and I featured this in that video and talked about how I don't really like Thomas Hardy's poetry and I wasn't really looking forward to reading it, but I kind of wanted to read it. But I was pleasantly surprised and ended up really loving his poetry this time around. So I've ordered another edition so I can read even more of it, and I just loved it so much and was so pleased that I did, because I wasn't expecting to. So it was one of those books that actually was so much better because I hadn't expected to love it, which I think is where I fell flat on some of these other books, is I expected to love them and then didn't. But with this one, I didn't expect to love it and then did, and it was so lovely to read. I feel like it was perfect for autumn, and his emotion and feeling behind his poems, the feelings that he expresses and the way he writes about the landscape was absolutely brilliant. My favourite poem was one called The Darkling Thrush. That was my favourite poem from the entire collection, I think. But there were so many others that I love. So I might make a blog post actually, because I feel like you can talk more about poetry in a blog post than you can in a video, talking about my favourite of his poems that I read and the perfect ones for autumn. So I think that would be nice. But I'm going to read more Thomas Hardy poetry now, and I'm going to do a video once I've read more talking about his poetry and the different editions that he did and the different themes running through his poems, so I'll do that at some point once I have read more. But I absolutely loved it. So pleased that I read this. Would highly recommend it if you've read Thomas Hardy's novels or just want something that's going to be perfect for autumn. So those were the books that I read during August. I had such a good Classicsathon, and I was really pleased that I got through lots of the books that I featured on my TBR, and the ones that I haven't read I'm going to roll over to the next few months, so I'll have read some of them if I didn't already. I'm currently reading The Castle of Otranto and enjoying that, so you'll see that in next month's wrap up. So if there was a book that I featured on my TBR that hasn't been featured, then it will probably be featured in the next few months in another wrap up. So I'd love to know in the comments what you read during August, and I will see you guys soon. Happy reading!